Hey guys, what's up? Unrested back again. First time I've had a weekend off in a long while, but I'm here and that's what matters. Today we're going over a story I kind of wanted to talk about last week when I dealt with my weirdest student stories, and this is the weirdest hire I ever had. This is back when I first opened my school in Japan, and I was kind of whole new to just being like the entrepreneur thing, new to the running your own business thing, new to like every aspect of it. I had worked as a teacher, an English teacher, an English conversation teacher, a kindergarten, all that different stuff. I'd done all the different ages, all the different levels, but actually running the business side of it was very, very new to me. I had to learn all about marketing, creating flyers, creating a business website, and hiring. And lo and behold, hiring is one of the most difficult parts of running a business. I'm sure any of you who are watching this right now who are small business owners and have had to hire employees can agree with me on that hiring the proper employees is one of the hardest things. In Japan, it was even harder because when I would have to hire somebody, they would have to be bilingual. They would also have to be able to use a computer in the way that a secretary or a business manager would. They would have to be able to answer phones for customers both speaking English and Japanese. Um, and they'd have to help with like daily duties like cleaning and shutting down and opening for the day. Um, I handled all the teaching stuff. I handled kind of the customer service as far as like talking to the customers at the door or when we had demo lessons and stuff like that. But some of the stuff was that most difficult for me was just like handling the taxes. The taxes involved in Japan are for the most part not overly complicated, but me reading kanji that deal with taxes and the different brackets and stuff I was supposed to have things in, that was more difficult. I wasn't the best at being able to read that. I probably read like a kindergartner as far as Japanese is concerned. So kindergartners usually can't do taxes. Let's put it that way, right? Um, I had gone through some different situations with employees, and one of the hardest parts I felt like with hiring an employee was that I just couldn't give them enough work. Um, I was a school that was open from when elementary schools would let out to pretty much when parents could come pick them up. So that was like a bracket between like 2:30 to usually 6:30, and that's when I would need the helper the most. So it's only like a 4-hour day. Couldn't hire full time. They just weren't enough things to do to hire someone full time. And like, look, everybody wants to work to get enough to be having a livable wage. I completely respect that, and if I could have offered that, I would have. Probably if I had stayed in Japan and kept pushing with that school, it would have become a job like that for somebody. Now I have a friend who's running it, and pretty much him and his wife just do everything, so they don't need to hire a secondary employee like I did. So, like I said, this job that I was hiring out for was pretty much like secretarial duty. The first couple of people I had work with me were mostly friends of my wife who were dental hygienists and they just wanted a little bit of side work. But what would always happen with them is they would get offered so many jobs within the dental system that they would eventually be like, sorry, like I love working here, but I've just been offered so many different jobs because there was always work for them that they're like, now I'm going to fill that part time work with being a dentist, dental hygienist, because they paid more than I did. Of course, being a dental hygienist would pay more than my job would. Um, so they'd be like, thanks for the time working here, and they were great. Like they could do everything. I will say, like every dental hygienist I ever hired was like on top of it. Like I never had to ask them to do anything. They were just always doing the next thing. Like when I say like Japanese take initiative, these people were constantly taking initiative. So eventually I got to a point where I was having a lot of trouble finding someone to take this place. And what happened was a school opened up near me that was also an English teaching school, but I say it's English teaching. It more so taught Japanese culture. It was kind of a strange situation where it was run by two Japanese ladies who would teach gaijin, foreigners, Japanese things like how to use chopsticks, how to play shogi, how to cook Japanese dishes and stuff like that. An interesting little place. And they called me up one day and they said, "Hey, would you be okay if like we drop some of our flyers off at your place, and you could drop some flyers off of your school at our place?" And I thought, yeah, that's like a great idea. We're not really in competition with each other. Like I said, they did teach some English, but pretty much what it was they had some really super elderly customers who would learn English from Japanese people, and these were just like folks learning the most basic terms in English, and they needed it explained to them in Japanese, and that was something like my school just didn't do. If you came to my school was an immersion school. You walked in the door, I'm speaking English to you. Um, so like that wasn't really for old people. Like I said, mine was more like people drop their kids off after elementary school and we talk English the whole time. That's just my philosophy. I feel like immersion was the best way to learn. And for elderly people, that can sometimes be overwhelming or intimidating. They're just looking to relax and like maybe learn some like quick words to go travel overseas for a short time or watch American cinema or something like that, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And they wanted to learn it from like Japanese ladies who are just kind of like the same age and stuff like that. So, like I said, we exchanged flyers. I put my stuff over at their place, and they said, like, call us up and let us know if you ever need any help with anything, and we'll do the same if we ever need you. And we did do that. Like, we exchanged some lessons. They sent some people over who were wanting to learn more advanced English. Of course, my school could handle that. And I sent over elderly people to them that were like looking for a super cheap lesson that only taught the most basics of English. Um, and then at one point, when I was really desperate for somebody to work at my place, I called them up and I said, "Hey, would you guys have any staff that work there part time that would also want to work part time at my place?" Because I thought, I need bilingual staff. I need people who've worked at a school type setting. Maybe they have someone who's working, and they're like, "Yeah, we can kind of do that for a little while." And like they sent over two of their employees who kind of took turns working the shift, and they would come in, but like they could only make like a couple hours. They'd be like there for like 1 hour or 2 hours. And I'd be like, "No, I need somebody who can actually work like a full 4 hours, like while I'm working." They're like, "Oh, okay, we have somebody who's kind of like a volunteer at our place, and she could probably do it. She's always looking to pick up a little extra work." And I thought, like, a volunteer at your place? Okay, I mean, I was like, "Well, I'm looking to hire somebody, but you can send her over and I'll interview her and see if she like fits the placement for the job." And they sent her over, and she had lived in America for 16 years of her life. Like when she was really young, her parents had some kind of job over there in America, so her English was really good. Like she could speak fluent. She didn't have like even really much of an accent. But then when she was done with her teenage years, she moved back to Japan. So she was mostly like living the rest of her life as a Japanese person in a Japanese atmosphere, with the culture of Japan. And so she comes over. We're gonna call her. I gave her a fake name of Emiko. That's what we're gonna call her from here on out. Her name is Emiko. She comes over. She interviews. Seems nice enough. A little bit dressed slightly unprofessional for the interview. She just came in like jeans and a sweatshirt, and I thought like, well, you don't have to be like really dressed up to work my job. I pretty much wore like business casual for every time I taught. I covered up all my tattoos and everything like that. I never let kids see my tattoos. I pretty much dress like how I dress now for teaching, which is like a golf shirt or a button-up collared shirt. But I thought, like, you know what? Like, being the secretary here at my school, it's not an ultra professional situation. Like, I'm not expecting people to come in, like, business attire every day. So this will do. As long as she's nice, she can answer the phone, she can understand what her duties are. That's fine. So I talked to her. I think, okay, works out. She's can speak English. She's worked on a computer. She understands how computers work. Not like one employee I had. I told a story earlier about one I hired who just like refused to learn computers, even though like her job had been, balancing budgets and stuff like that at multiple schools around the public school system. This lady had actually, like learned how to use a computer properly, understood the basics of like Excel, spreadsheets, word processing, etc. So I was like, oh, okay, well, great. I mean, that's perfect for what I need. And she could work the full 4 hours. But the one thing that was strange was, like she had said about the last place she had worked at, she said she only wanted to volunteer at my place. And she was like, I'll volunteer because for me, it's all about volunteering and giving my time to improve a place. And I was like, okay, like, I mean, I can put you on a pay schedule and stuff like that. Like, I only need you for these 3 days of the week for 4 hours each day. Um, but I mean, if you really want to volunteer, I'm not going to fight you on that. I mean, like, um, I'm not going to be like shoving money down your throat. Now, one thing I did do was, um, whenever she'd go out to like run an errand or something for me, I'd make sure she like kept all the money that I gave her to like buy stuff. I'd be like, we need to replace this light in here, and we need this kind of table for doing this kind of lesson in a podium in this room. And like she'd go out and order the stuff, and then she'd be like, okay, this is like the receipt and your what's left over. And I'd be like, no, 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 you just keep that. So that'd be like ways I'd try to like slip her money and stuff like that, to be like, look, you just, I don't know how far you had to walk or if you used your car or whatever. Keep the money to like fill your stuff back up in your car, and just for the walking time and stuff like that. Like, come on, like keep some of it. But she was real big about that. Like, she wanted to volunteer. She's like, I volunteer at a Buddhist temple. I volunteer at the cultural Japanese school down the street. I'm really big on volunteering. It's a big part of my personality. Okay, I'm not going to fight you on that. Um, and like, this isn't totally out of the question of like beliefs within Japan. Like Shintoism and Buddhism do have beliefs that like encounter things like volunteering. Why she chose my school as a place, I was a little bit confused by, but she did. So what? I'm not going to fight her on it, like I said, and she could do everything. But one thing was weird. Um, I had interviewed her, and actually my wife had been on the interview too. And one thing she did was she would constantly message my wife about my school. And this was kind of weird because it's like I never ever message anybody at my wife's job about her work. Like, I'm never like, what Aya could really use at her job? She could really use this and this at work. And she should have this. They would just be like, what are you talking about? Like, she's a dentist. You don't know anything about being a dentist. Don't suggest things that she should add to her job or like bring to her job or do at her job. And the same thing like goes for me. Like, my wife doesn't teach English. She's not interested in teaching English. She doesn't have any background in teaching it. So when Emiko would call her and be like, I think Scott should turn this room into this kind of study area for the kids, my wife would be like, okay, why are you telling me this? And it started out like my wife was just kind of like, oh, I don't know, maybe she's just like really excited to work there and like wants to talk in Japanese, like in her native language, to someone else who can speak about, your school and understand it in Japanese. Like, maybe she's shy to talk to you about it and wants to run it past me first, and then you get to talking to me about it, and I suggest it to you because of her. I was like, yeah, maybe, but like, I'll talk to her about it. I'll let her know, like, if you really have anything you want to change about the school, just come to me first. I'm the owner of the school. So I had to talk with her. I was like, hey, look, Emiko, I understand you're excited about working here and everything, but like, this is my business. And if there's anything you think like you want to suggest, or there's like a change you want, or like there's something you think could run better, just run it past me. Like, you're a fluent English speaker. You spoke English for 16 years in America. I know you can understand everything I say, and I understand everything you say. So just come to me about it. She would say like, yeah, of course, real polite. Of course I'll do that. And I'll suggest it to you first. But like, it still kept continuing. Like, she wanted to do like this major cleaning of my school, which I do every year, usually around springtime or around post New Year's is when you do like a big cleaning in Japan. You set up all these like little candles and everything, and it's like a little invitation to the gods to come in and walk through your area, your house, your school, your business, whatever. You clean the Genkan, which is like the foyer and everything, and it's kind of like inviting in lucky spirits for the new year. So we did this massive cleaning every year, and usually I'd also do like a kind of a pretty big cleaning after every holiday we had at my school. We'd have like holiday celebrations for, of course, things like Christmas, Halloween, Easter, and things like that. And you'd always have to take a bunch of ornaments and decorations out and put them away. So I would, that's what I would do. I'd do a huge cleaning during that time because it would. But she wanted to do like this massive one. She like reorganize the closets and everything like that, and went through room after room. And she asked my wife to do this with her. And my wife's like, "What? Like, why? Why me? Why doesn't she ask you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, that should really be my job. It's my school. I'll be there, of course, to help." And my wife was like, "All right, look, I'm gonna come. I'm gonna help. I'll talk to her about this and say, like, I understand you want to improve Scott's school by like going even further beyond the limit of cleaning that he does and clean even further. So I'll also talk to her there about, if this is other things you want to have happen in the future, just talk to Scott about it. Let's have a meeting about that and just discuss how like this is Scott's school. Talk to him about any improvements in the future." So we had this, and we did this huge cleaning. It really organized my closets at the school that had like all different types of decorations in it. That helped out a bunch. But it really didn't even like last very long because there wasn't like a ton to clean up. Being a kid's school, you do things like mop, sweep, vacuum, wipe down, use disinfectant baby wipes over everything, Lysol every day. Like you got to do that every day, or you're like gonna get sick. All right. You take your shoes off when you walk in because it's Japan, so you're not having dirt spread on the floor by that either. I also went out of my way to make sure there wasn't like carpets there. I always felt like carpets were kind of disgusting when you had like a school for little kids. Throw up, poop, pee, spilling food. That gets disgusting in carpets. So I did not have like carpets throughout the school. It was easy to just mop, clean, scrape whatever I needed to off the floor. So during that time, we also talk to her about like this situation of like, why do you keep messaging my wife about things that you want to do here at the school? And she's like, it's because I'm worried. And my wife's like, you're worried about what? She's like, well, I was going through Scott's locker, and I wanted to help him with his addiction. And I was like, my addiction in my locker? And I'm like, what do I keep in my locker? I've got food for my lunch. I've got like my bag I bring each day from work. Usually has like study guides, ESL books, Aiken books, which are like, Aiken is like a test that kids have to pass to like reach a certain level of English language proficiency within the high school system of Japan. My wife's like, what do you mean? Like what kind of addiction or anything like that? She's like, I found these blue pills in there that are in this prescription bottle. And I was like, my ADHD medicine? And she's like, well, yeah, I know it's for ADHD because it says that on the bottle. And like, first of all, like alarms are going off in my head. Like, number one, why are you going through my personal locker? I am your boss. Number two, like if you know what ADHD is and you know people who take medicine for it, why are you calling it an addiction? And just number three, just WTF, like why are you going through my stuff? And like my wife, later she told me, she's like, I wanted to scream at that point. Like I wanted to scream at her and like all the anger in my chest and just get it off and scream at her. But instead she was like, look, like, just so you know, like our family is from a medical background, and his sister-in-law is a pharmacist and the other sister-in-law is a psychiatrist. So we kind of know what we're doing if we prescribe Scott something. We've got two people in the family who know what he's taking. And Scott himself has lived with ADHD like his whole life. It's kind of personal to like go through his stuff and accuse him of being an addict. That's not really cool. And I remember she didn't confront her like this with what she's saying, what I'm saying right now, face to face. She kind of like waited till this situation blew over because it was like real awkward. Like it was just like you could hear a pin drop. The room got real odd and quiet. But when she got home, she sent her this text saying all this stuff, and she said it like in the most like polite, like business professional way she could. But I remember her telling me, she's like, I wanted to scream at her in the middle of this cleaning session for going through your stuff. Like I myself was just kind of like, I was kind of I was like at a loss for words. Um, Part of me felt kind of like betrayed, but at the same time, I felt like, well, I mean, we were doing like a massive cleaning. I opened everything up. I opened up my locker. I opened up everything in the school to like just be going through. I mean, my pills that I take for ADHD weren't inside of my backpack, so it's not like she opened up my backpack and found them. We did clean out her locker too during this time, which had like I think like nothing in it. It had like business supplies, like mine did too. But I was kind of shocked that like that was something to her, and like she started to tell this story about like how herself when she was in America for 16 years that she became addicted to like all these different drugs and everything like that, and like she knew the signs of addiction and everything, and that's why she came back to Japan, and that the reason she volunteered at different places like this was because she knew she could mentally help people, because she had a background in psychology. And I was like, okay, well, like let's talk about all this tomorrow at my school before class starts. And I thought I'll explain to her how my medicine works, like how many doses I take. Maybe she doesn't understand ADHD. Maybe she doesn't understand like people taking psychiatric medicine. And like I had heard situations like this before. I had a friend who I worked with at a kindergarten one time, and I felt like super bad for him because he had taken the job at the kindergarten because he had been treated like a pariah at his last job. And I asked him like why one time. I'm like, why were you treated so bad at this last job? He said, well, like I had like major depression and anxiety, and I was taking medication for it, and I usually took it every day before I ate lunch. And one day I forgot to take it, and so I pulled out the medicine during lunch and took it in front of everybody. And people were like, he said, like the needle came off the record. Everybody suddenly stopped and looked at him and were like, Chris Sensei, like, what are you taking? What is this? And he's like, oh, it's just like meds for like, my depression, my anxiety, and stuff like that. And he said from like that day on, nobody at his work treated him the same ever again. Like they treated him like a drug addict. Like they were just kind of like, okay, like you need to leave your pills at home. Don't take them here. Don't take them in front of the kids. Don't. And he was just like, well, I mean, like I'm prescribed to take it every day with like food that I eat. And so like you got to also understand that like Japan's still very new to like psychology and psychiatry. Like it's still a very new concept to them, and they don't always treat people the right way they should, or like understand mental illness the right way they should, because it's just becoming a new concept recently. So this is how he was treated, and for me, I felt like, okay, this is like kind of the same situation. Like she's never heard of this stuff before. She's never, even like ADHD. I think Japan finally accepted it as an actual thing that existed in like 2014 or 2016. It was like really late. Like I remember one of my nephews getting diagnosed with it, and them being shocked, like the whole family being shocked because they had never heard of this before. And I'm like, what do you mean you never heard of it? Like it's been around for like a really long time. Like I think I got diagnosed back in America in like 1980. Surely you can, even if you don't read about it in Japan, you can read about it in other websites and just translate them and find out what ADHD is. And they're like, no, no, this has just actually been acknowledged as an actual real thing in 2016. I was just like, what? I mean, you can look this up online too. Like, it's shocking how long Japan went with just saying that, like, this kid just doesn't want to learn. They don't have focus. That, like, put him in a technical school and send him somewhere else. Don't let him go to normal public school. He's got some kind of like mental deficiency. Like they just didn't handle it. Like it's kind of crazy. I know, like I said, Japan's kind of like in the dark ages when it comes to psychology and psychiatry. I always describe it as like 1950s psychology as far as Japan is concerned. They're getting there slowly, little by little. They're starting to accept like, wait a second, this whole thing with people shutting themselves inside for ages and never coming out, that has to do with how we treated them because they were just like normal people who had like a little bit of a struggle and we ignored it. Like dyslexia is real. Like it's like stuff like that where they're just like, oh, that's why people are becoming hikikomori. That's why they're becoming recluses and shut-ins and stuff. Oh my god, like why didn't you guys tell us earlier? So anyway, back on track. I scheduled a meeting the next day. I said, look, we'll talk about this tomorrow. my wife was like ready to like fire her on the spot. My wife was like, "We're cutting this lady off," and I was just like, "Yeah, I still need a secretary. Like, let me at least look for another one before you go in there and rip her head off." Because my wife was furious, and like I understand, like that's one thing I love about my wife is she always is, I guess, taking care of me even when I'm ignorant for how to take care of myself. Like when I'm just kind of like, that's not such a big deal. Calm down. Like I told you the whole situation where one student kept trying to get cheaper and cheaper wages. I mean, cheaper and cheaper lessons. And then like she stood up to the guy and was just like, "You will not ask for cheaper lessons from my husband." Is another situation where my wife like stepped in and was like, "No, Scott, you don't take this. I step in for you and tell them they're being an idiot." Like, it's, that's why we've been married like what, 17 something years now. It's been forever. So she, I sent her a message like, "Let's have a meeting tomorrow." She shows up and she gets back into this whole rigmarole about like, I'm a psychologist. I know a lot about psychology. The reason I volunteer at all these different places is because I just love to mentally help people. And I felt like maybe because you were taking this medicine, you needed help. But your wife explained it to me. I kind of understand now. I looked up ADHD, and I was like, oh, okay. So I said, like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you had like a background in psychology. Let me, let me know what you can tell me about psychology because I'm always interested. I'm interested in the subject of psychology quite a bit." And I was like, "So, like, what do you have? Like a PhD or like?" And she's like, "Oh, no." And I was like, "Okay, so like, what is it? Like a undergrad in psychology, like a 4-year degree?" And she's like, "Oh, no, like, I only finished high school." And I was like, "So what do you mean when you say you have like a background in psychology? Like, what does that mean?" And she was like, "Well, I learned it from this group." And guys, I cannot remember what the name of this group was, but she like sent me a link to like the classes she had taken and stuff like this. And I remember it had some kind of abbreviation like LLDP or something like that. And it was like the LLDP club or the LLDP group. And I didn't get to look it up right away, but like during that whole talk the next day, she's like, I've overstepped my bounds and I've said too much and I've embarrassed myself. So this will be my last day. And she like just put her hat on and like left the school like right there in the middle of our meeting. And I was just like, "Uh, so you're quitting?" And she's like, "Yes." And she walked out the door and I never ever saw this employee ever again. And like she lived like in my area too. Like she lived really close to the school. I've never seen her again. I've never seen her walking around. Because like as she was leaving, like I was kind of so shocked that she was suddenly quitting and that like I kind of understood her embarrassment of like maybe having overstepped her bounds, which she kind of had pretty much. But like I was still like so like I guess in an ineffable state of like all these different things that had suddenly happened in just that short amount of time of cleaning my school, being accused of being an addict, trying to explain that like it's ADHD medicine, having a meeting with her and finding her talking about psychology, and then suddenly her quitting in the middle of the meeting because she said she had like embarrassed herself or overstepped her bounds. That I was like, oh, okay, so you're quitting? And she's like, "Yes." And I was just like, "Okay, well, don't be a stranger, bye." Like I didn't know what to say. Like it was the easiest part I kind of ever had with like parting with an employee, like I having to let somebody go. I kind of did want to let her go after that because it did feel awkward, but I wasn't like actually about to fire her. I was just gonna like talk to her and be like, "Okay, look, like you can't delve into my personal life at all. Like I understand you want to improve the school, but like number one, you constantly contacting my wife is annoying. You going through my personal stuff, not cool. Don't do this." And number three, like ADHD is real. It exists. It's a real thing. I have it. Chill. But that's how it ended. It was such a weird, awkward moment of my career as an English teacher that I just, even telling the story now, I'm like, God, that ended so weird. But okay, so getting back to the thing she sent me this link about what her psychology background was, this LLDP thing, and I look this up online after she sent me the link about like this is, I have a psychological background, like I've studied psychology for so long, for like the last 15 years of my life I've studied psychology, and I've just felt like I was called to help people. Like these are some of the things that she was saying about like this group that she was part of that had taught her how to be a psychologist, which was not like any kind of actual certified group. So I looked this group up, like LLDP. It's something like that, and the first thing that comes on Wikipedia when I look it up is like considered a cult in all of Europe, banned in Norway, banned in Germany, banned in Sweden, banned, like it was like banned in all these European countries. Like they said, like refuse to let this kind of group be part of their country, like as it is labeled as a cult. And I was just like, what is this? So apparently this was like some sort of thing, like some sort of like gateway, like new agey group that like taught that using any kind of medication at all was like evil. Like medication was given to people from Satan or something like that. That like there was a higher power that was like an extraterrestrial force that could like psychologically heal you from the inside out if you just like listen to your heart and stuff like that. Like, all the classic like weird new agey stuff. And I was like, oh wow, this is just like totally psychobabble, like weird stuff. Like, look, guys, like if you're into new agey stuff and things like that, that's cool. Actually, if you're into any religion at all, whatever, that's cool. I just don't support proselytizing it to people who don't want to be part of it. Like, don't, no soliciting, okay? Like, I keep it to yourself. Don't try to like integrate it into my life, okay? I don't want to push anybody to join any kind of beliefs that I have. If they want to ask me about my beliefs, that's fine. But like, I'm not a big fan of proselytizing anything. And that's pretty much what was happening. Like, she was trying to use the psychology or new agey psychology or whatever the hell this was on me and my wife. Like, there was this stuff about like bring the couple together and like talk to them about like what's hurting them and like how they can grow a business together and then give that business's money to the LLDP group and stuff like this. I like looked deeper and deeper and I was just like, oh my god, it's like a pyramid scheme, cult psychology, weird new age psychology type goofy groupness that's like something like, what was that like gateway group that was like believed UFOs were behind the Hale Bopp comic that they committed suicide by eating applesauce and cyanide and thinking they were going to join a UFO ship. It was like weird, like that kind of weird. Like, I'm not trying to mock anything else that's like new agey type stuff. That stuff's all fine, but like when it gets into like you will transcend to an alien, extraterrestrial level of existence, like I kind of be like, okay. So that was what happened. That's how this whole thing resolved. I found out I hired an alien cult psychologist who had learned all their mumbo jumbo from an extraterrestrial leader that was banned in multiple European countries. So like that's the ending of the story. And even now telling it, like, oh my god, like what a weird situation. I went back. I was so confused by this situation. I went back to the last employee I had and I had to tell her this story. I was just like, can I tell you the weirdest story of the weirdest situation I ever had just recently? Her and her husband was like, he's like still my best friend to this day, like one of my best friends in Japan. And she had worked for me for a little bit until her job just got too hectic and she had to like go full time. And I asked her like after this had happened, like I was like, is there any chance you can come back? I just had to like let go of the newest person I hired. And she's like, what happened? Like that's like really quick to let her go. I was like, well, she quit, but like here's the whole situation. And she was just like, wow, that is weird. I remember she said like, I think she's like, I think Scott, like that's not just weird in Japan. That's weird in your own country too, right? And I was like, yeah, that would be weird in America too. Like she's like, yeah, I think that's like internationally weird. That's what she said, like for the situation. And this is like a Japanese person saying that who's always like super polite, tries never to talk trash about anyone. But she's like, after hearing that story, I've never heard such like an internationally weird story of someone trying to join your school and like get you to like join a cult or something like that. So like there is weird stuff like that in Japan. One of the most famous, I guess the two most famous, is there's like a Buddhist, a branch of Buddhism, and this isn't like the hit Buddhism, fundamentalist weird stuff exists with every branch of every religion. But there's one version of Buddhism that is big about proselytizing to get like people to join and like donate all their money that they ever earn at work to it. And it's something like, I think it's called like Happy Buddhism or something like that. That's the way it translates. But it's pretty much a cult. The people who actually owned our house before we bought it in Japan were part of that cult. And all of our neighbors loved us when we moved in because they said like, hey, like you guys aren't part of any religion or anything like that. And we're like, well, I mean, we don't practice anything or like, push anything. And they're like, good. Finally, we're not going to like have to hear about Happy Buddhism anymore. You guys aren't part of that, right? And I'm like, no, what the heck? No, of course we're not part of that. And they're like, oh my God, the people who lived there before you like would come to every door on our floor and like push their like Happy Buddhism religion like nonstop and try to get us to join and donate money. And you guys aren't going to do that, right? We're like, no, what is that? Like I had to look it up after this. And we're like, no, we have nothing to do with that religion. And they're like, okay, good. You guys are the best neighbors ever. And like we lived peacefully. We still live peacefully. I still own the house. I still own the condo, apartment, whatever you want to call it in Japan, and still happy with our neighbors there because we're not psycho cult pushers of proselytization. And there's also like a weird branch of like Christianity that comes over from Korea, from South Korea, called the Moonies. If you want to look into that further, that gets like into such a deep rabbit hole. It actually connects to the whole assassination of Shinzo Abe. And actually, because it went so deep into Japan and reached a point where a ex-prime minister was assassinated over being connected to that cultish religion, a lot of push has been going on in Japan to like completely ban that out of Japan to get all together. That's actually the biggest stand I've ever seen Japan take against any kind of religion or cult. Like to give you an idea of like how nonchalant Japan is usually about not trying to push religions or cults or anything out of their country. The cult that actually put the sarin gas attack on the Tokyo subway is still allowed to exist as a branch of themselves within Japan. They're still loonies and still crazy people who think they're going to start an apocalypse, and they're watched very closely by the government, but they're still allowed to exist in Japan. So if you've pushed Japan hard enough that they're like going to ban your religion or your cult or whatever from Japan, then you've pushed pretty hard. So yeah, that's the weird story I have about the weirdest hiring situation I ever had in Japan. This was a long one. Oh my God, I did not expect it to go almost 40 minutes. I hope that was interesting. I don't know. I feel I feel discombobulated even after just telling this story. Guys, if you want more videos like this, if you want to hear more about Japan, just join as a member. You'll get an extra video every week. We're up to like 8 or 9 videos now. There's a bunch of extra material. You'll learn things like awesome foods, awesome places to visit, secret sites that no one ever talks about in like travel or tour guides around Japan that I highly recommend you go see. Some like weird situations, weird encounters I've had in Japan, places you might want to stay away from and things like that. My experiences with earthquakes in Japan, those are some of the extra videos I've got for my members. And being a member is only $1.90 a month. That's pretty cheap for an extra video. 4 extra videos every month for $1.90. I think that's a pretty good deal, right? That's not too bad. We've got as our members currently, which it actually increased by 2 last week, which I'm kind of shocked. Capybara Daimyo, nice name, I love it. Fat Jaskins, Sprinkly Donut, Yodaru, Luna in Cola, Ricardo Contreras, Analoki, Slayer Duck, Blind Man Travels, Jonas Slocum, Ida Q, Ice Cold, Reinhard or Die Trying, Trek Nick, I Am Sandpaper, Aaron Spooner, Andre Sanchez, and Smile Kita 13. Guys, thank you so much for keeping me motivated to make these videos and put out an extra one every single month, every single week, I should say, every single week, 4 extra every month. And I will be in Japan in a little less than a month, making videos out there. Some people have asked for the walk and talk videos where I walk around Japan and talk about daily life. Those will be coming back when I'm in Japan for the next 2 months. And anybody who wants to meet up, hang out, or just, shoot the whatever, come, let's do it when I'm in Japan. Let's hang out, let's chill. It's the summer and I am completely free during the whole time I'm there. Until next time, I've been unrested and I hope you have a great rest of the day.